My name is Dan Sullivan. I'm a resident here at the Avalon at Lexington Hills, and our neighbors at LexMedia have invited us to offer some recipes for your interest, and I've taken them up on the invitation tonight, and I've chosen to make for you some tomato bolognese sauce or red meat sauce. And our three main ingredients, I'll go through all of them, of course, as I use them, but our three main ingredients are a canned tomato and some ground beef, and some hot Italian sausage. Now, starting off, you need to heat up your pans. I've used a big pot for the sauce itself, and then a frying pan that I'll use to cook some of the ingredients. And I'll use olive oil throughout the entire recipe, probably in total about half a cup, but I like to use portions of it. But the canned tomatoes, you probably see rows and rows of these in the supermarket. And there are four basic styles of these tomatoes in the can. Remember, your ultimate objective is to get it into a sauce in this pot. So along the spectrum of the four styles, you've got at one end sauce already, but that's not really tomatoes, as it turns out. That's sort of a tomato can filled with concentrate, tomatoes from concentrate. It's sort of like getting a carton of orange juice that really isn't fresh squeezed, it's from concentrate. So I stay away from the sauce in the can. At the other extreme, you have whole tomatoes just peeled, and those are very good, but they take a lot of effort to break up once you get them in the pot. Remember, the ultimate objective is to get it into a sauce. Back towards the end of the sauce, you've got diced tomatoes, and those are very popular. They're the closest to sauce you can get, and they are from real tomatoes. However, in the process of dicing them, some chemical is introduced, I'm told, and that prohibits them from further breaking down into a sauce. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing if you like chunky tomatoes in your tomato sauce. But if you're trying to get it ultimately into a sauce, I would stay away from the diced tomatoes, which leaves what I use, which is crushed tomatoes. Basically, the whole tomatoes crushed up. In other words, they've done a lot of the work for you. Of course, all of this is moot if you've got a food processor, but I don't. I will use the crushed tomatoes. As far as brands, I just like to use the ones with Italian names. They're all probably come from some warehouse in New Jersey, but. And I've got a 28-ounce can. They come in 33 ounces, I think, and 33 is fine. A little bit more is fine with the basic sauce. You just pour that into your pot. But the 28 is good for the recipe I'm making, and that seems to be the most popular. Now, in addition to that, you're going to want some tomato paste, and you'll see this along with the tomatoes in the can in your supermarket. And 6 ounces is fine to go along with the 28 ounces or the 33 ounces of the tomatoes in the can. And what I do is just dump the whole thing in the sauce. It's very sticky inside, so what I like to do is just open up both sides of the can. And just plop it in. What the paste does is add a certain texture to the otherwise liquefied tomatoes. That's good enough. Now you can mix these up and let that start to heat while you go in and make your other ingredients. See, that's starting to thicken as the two products mix. Now, what you want is a few of your vegetables. They take a little while to chop up, so I've taken the liberty of doing so in advance. What you need is a yellow onion and then maybe 4 or 5 cloves of garlic. This is a yellow onion, started out about the size of a baseball, which is a good size to start with. You don't need to use it all. It allows for a lot of waste. But here's what you come up with at the end. You can chop it as finely as you want. My family, they like it a little extra chunky, so be it. And what you just want to do is put them in a frying pan. Again, you've got the olive oil already in there. And you just want to let these open up for about 5 minutes. We just lost our first one. That's okay. Now while that's opening up, they just become about just translucent in about 5 minutes. What I'll do next is use about the 4 or 5 cloves of garlic. Again, you can buy these already chopped, which is what I like to do since I'm not a big fan of chopping up garlic. And we'll put those in after we get the onions opened up. But you don't want the garlic to cook too much. Burned garlic is bad garlic. Burned onions are just oniony. But if you burn the garlic, it's going to be a bit of a problem. And believe me, you don't want to go in there and have to pick out the little pieces of garlic that are burned. A bit of a fire hazard on your fingers. But I've got those onions opening up. What I do is move them off to the side and then get the garlic in the middle. Again, about the equivalent of 4 or 5 cloves. One thing I like about buying them in the jar already cut up is that they're nice and small. It's not nice eating this sauce and getting a big chunk of garlic in a bite. So let that go. And then I move to my spices. Now, I use 3 spices. We have basil, oregano, and black pepper. Now, I could get them fresh. They sell them at Stop and Shop or any supermarket over near the vegetables, of course. And but that's just a lot of extra work, a lot of chopping. And I'm not exactly a connoisseur. I find that the dried spices are just as good. And I use about, this is very much to taste. I like it very spicy, but I use about 1/4 cup of each of the basil and the oreganos. And then I use about 1/8 cup of pepper. Now, if you use too much basil or too much oregano, it's not that bad. I think it tastes better, but I do limit myself because I said I like it a little spicy. But if you use too much pepper, that's a problem. The only complaint I've ever gotten with this sauce from my daughters, they said I used too much pepper, and even I had to admit as I was eating that particular lot that they were right. So I try to keep it to about 1/8 cup of the black pepper. I think this is good. You can mix the onions and the garlic together. Now keep the frying pan hot because we're going to have to use those for the meats in a few minutes. Just stir these in to your tomatoes and the paste. And I'll go ahead with the meats before I go to the actual use of the spices, just to get them going. Now in this instance, I have them already cooked, but if you were making this from scratch, this would be the best way to do it so that you can, it'll take a little time for you to brown the meat. This is 1 pound of ground sirloin in this instance. You can use any sort of ground beef product. The sirloin just creates less fat, although I like to drain it off, whether I have a lot or a little of it anyway. I'm just going to heat it up here. As you can see, I've already browned it before I came to the show tonight. Just let that heat up a little bit. While that's doing that, this is the sausage. For my sausage, I buy the hot Italian sausages at Costco. You can buy them anywhere. You could even buy sweet Italian sausages, but I don't like to talk about those. That's not my favorite. This is a hot and spicy sauce. That's just the way I like it. But what I use is a package of 5. It's a little more than 1 pound. So you've got 1 pound of ground beef or more if you like, 1.25 pounds. And this is about 1 pound, maybe 1.25 pounds of the hot Italian sausage. It's about 5 big sausages, 5 of these. This one is actually, I've left this uncooked, as I'll show you how to get at the sausage that's in the casing in a minute. But while the meat is heating up, let me go ahead and do some of the spices. As I said, about 1/4 cup of basil. Again, with the basil, don't worry about putting in too much. To be perfectly honest, if I'm not on television, I don't use a measuring cup. I just sort of toss it. That's how easy it is to just get the amount you need. You need more as you move on. You don't like the taste of the sauce, just throw in some more if you like. And then the black pepper, that's where you could run into a little bit of trouble. So be careful about those. Again, just about 1/8 of a cup. Mix it all around. One thing you'll notice is that it's starting to get very thick. And again, as I said, we're looking for a sauce ultimately, and not a sloppy Joe filling or something like that. And I'll show you how to remedy that situation. But once the meat gets in, it's going to get thicker still. You know, when it comes to breaking up the meat as you're browning it, you should probably try to get it as small as you can. You're not going to get liquid beef, but you're not making meatballs either. So you want to get it into nice little chunks that'll sort of disappear in a sauce. Now, I haven't forgotten about the sausage, but before I go further, I want to deal with that thickness problem. You need to put some liquid in the sauce to sort of get rid of the sloppy Joe material that you're putting together at the moment. And you can use pretty much one of 3 things. You could use water, which is what most people probably use. I just don't like the idea of using water. It just seems like sort of a dilution of all of the great tastes you've got going on in there. At the other extreme, you could use a beef broth. That seems like it makes the most sense since this is a meat sauce, but I just don't like the taste of beef broth. And so what I go for is something sort of in the middle, and that's a chicken broth. It doesn't have much of a taste, but at least it has something. Maybe it's just a psychological effect. I don't like the fact of putting just pure water in there, diluting things. So this lends some taste, I guess, but without taking away any of the other tastes from the rest of this sauce. As to how much you use, I just have this is a 32-ounce container. Start out putting in 6 ounces and see where that takes you. This is something you could always make thinner as the need presents itself through the course of making the sauce. Let that go. Now, the sausage. Get a little bit more olive oil in your pan for the sausage. Sausage is a little bit more difficult than the beef to prepare. And while you want to brown the meat and cook it a little more if you want, before you put it in the pot, you should make an effort with the pork sausage. This is hot Italian pork sausage. And you want to make an effort to really do a better job of actually cooking that in the frying pan, because while it will cook in the sauce once you let that sit after you're done, you want to make sure this is really cooked. And so I like to cook it in the pan to make sure it's done. I'm going to let this go a little bit longer and heat up before I put it in this pot. But it has been cooked before. Now, while that's heating, let me show you how I deal with these sausages. Again, these are sausages you can buy anywhere. I happen to get these from Costco, but I saw them in the store today. They're around anywhere in the meat section. Now, what these sausages are, they're encased in a little sleeve, and you just need to break them out of the sleeve. And you do that by just cutting them lengthways, and then just pulling it this way and pulling the sleeve off of it. And there you go. Now, if you're ambitious and foolish, you can try to cut these into little pieces, but as you'll see, no matter how sharp your knife, that quickly becomes just a mess. So what you really have to do instead is give up on the knife and just start pulling it apart. And I'll show you what happens once you get it in the pan, where you should break it up even further under the heat. Now you can only get the sausage so small. I mentioned that you should try to get the meat into small chunks, if not into little bits. The sausage can only get so small, and that's fine. It'll lend a lot of flavor to the sauce. And then if you get a couple of chunks in a spoonful, things could be a lot worse. So, it's delicious stuff, so I wouldn't mind. So, now just get this going, a little more. That's all the ingredients in here. I'm going to throw in a little bit more chicken broth because it does seem very thick. Again, you're making a sauce, not sloppy Joe material. Although I'll tell you, it makes great sloppy Joe material. You're making sloppy Joes. Just don't get, at that point, don't make it too thin. And if you make a bunch of this, if you double the recipe, you can have this, it freezes beautifully, like a lot of stews and things like that. If you leave it in the refrigerator overnight or freeze it over the weeks, you'll find that the taste just gets better. They sort of mold together better over time, and it's just an even better dish reheated than it is at first. I don't want to make it too thin, but I think we're going to need a little more broth. And making a mess. That should be it. Just so that you know, I've used about maybe a third of this 32-ounce container. All right, I'm going to put my top there and let that sit while I show you how I made that sausage. I'm not going to put this in the pot tonight because I don't think it'll have a chance to get as cooked as it should be. Let me just show you how you break that apart. Just take 2 wooden spoons and then you just have to do this. Yes, this. It's not fun. You have a teenager, maybe you could have the teenager do it. They might enjoy it. They're cooking. But it can get very tedious after a while. You're never going to get it looking the same consistency as the ground beef, but you can at least make it smaller so that you don't bite off chunks of sausage while you're eating the sauce on your spaghetti or whatever you're putting it on. You just let that go. You get a little bit more. Olive oil in there, give it something to keep from sticking. And I'll let that cook. That'll cook for about 10 minutes before I would feel comfortable putting it in the sauce. Again, I'm not going to do it tonight. I've got enough in there now. But let's see how long that takes to cook. Now, as for this pot, you could probably eat it in 30 minutes, or you could eat it in 3 hours. It could just sit for as long as you want it. And the longer it sits, the better it will probably end up tasting. As I said, if you put it in the refrigerator overnight, it'll taste even better than reheated the next day. But for now, I don't want to use my spoon that I used on the raw sausage, so I'll get a new one. For now, this is coming along pretty nicely. If you can see it from the overhead. It's got a nice thickness, maybe a little more. Thinner. But it's looking pretty good. So for tonight's purpose, I might let this go for 10 minutes, and then I'll see how it tastes. But while that's cooking, I want to take the chance to show you 2 other things while I've got this here. And that is, this is a pretty big deal. I did it in about half the time, maybe a third of the time. But if you want to get something like this, but you don't have this much time and you don't have this much ambition, then you could always use a jar of the tomato sauce without all the effort that I put into it and without a lot of the ingredients. Now, I've tried a lot of different jars. I work for a company that makes a particular tomato sauce in the jar. But I love this sauce, and I've tried a lot of jarred sauces when I don't have the time to make this. And the best I've found is the Prego marinara. This is the one that, among other things, I'm no health nut, but I don't like a lot of sugar in products like this, and they all come with sugar, and not just to make them unhealthy, but to make them sweet for some reason. And as I said, this is a sort of hot sauce, and I like my tomatoes products more on the spicy side than on the sweet side. So I stay away from sugar for both those reasons. And this one seems to have the least amount of sugar, and it also seems to taste the best. Now, be careful when you're buying this Prego marinara. They have a lot of different Prego types. And in particular, they have something known as Prego Traditional. And particularly at Market Basket, I noticed that they don't even sell marinara anymore. They used to have a long row of marinara and a long row of traditional. Now they just have 2 long rows of traditional. I've checked the ingredients on both, and there's a lot of sugar in that traditional. So I stick with this marinara. Now, once you get this in the pot, you can pick and choose among all the other ingredients that I've used here. Obviously, the sausage, if you're going to make sausage, you might as well go ahead and make the whole dish. But you can cut it, so you can cut out the sausage, but you could throw in a pound of ground beef if you have it. You don't have to cut up an onion if you don't like doing that. And if you've got the garlic in the little jar like that already minced, you might want to throw in a little of that. But the big difference I make, and this is, I don't remember the last time I had a jar of that, literally like a decade since I've had a jar of that unchanged. And the one change I always make is to use the spices. And that's basil, oregano, and then black pepper. And that's about it's a 23-ounce jar. That was more than that, but 23-ounce jar. And I use about, again, the same quarter cup of oregano, quarter cup of basil, and 1/8 of a cup of black pepper. Be especially careful with the black pepper on this, because that can really get overpowering. The other thing I wanted to show you while this is cooking, and some of that liquid might burn off while this is cooking, the top, the use of the top in the pot helps it from burning off, but still can get a little thick. So that's why you keep going to whatever dilution device you're using. In my case, just chicken broth. Again, as you could always use water if you just don't have chicken broth. Heat up a little bit. But one thing I wanted to show you while I'm here is how to turn this sauce. Obviously, you could use it for spaghetti or ravioli. It goes great with ravioli, or any other pasta, of course. But one thing I like to do with it is make a lasagna. Now, don't worry, this is not a show about lasagna. This is a show about this red sauce. But with the lasagna as I make it, making that sauce is about 90% of the work. So let me just show you how to do the extra 10%, and you'll know how to turn that sauce into something besides just a spaghetti sauce, is what we used to call it when I was a kid, spaghetti sauce. First, you want to get a pan about this size. This is 12 by 10. You can buy them at the store for like $1. If you have one, you need one that's about 12 inches long. If you have one that's longer, fine. You'll just have to make do, and I'll show you how you can do that. The pasta that you use is, of course, lasagna pieces. You can buy them in a product like this, several of them in every supermarket. And they come in about 10-inch length. And what you would do is create a layer that fits in the pan like that. You'd have several of them in this particular pan. You could fit 3 at the bottom and probably 2 layers later, 4 at the top. Now, you don't have to boil these at all. All you do is when you start this whole process, let me get these off. That's pretty much done. So that would be your sausage. I don't mean to skip around, but that'll be your sausage when you're pretty much done. That's pretty well cooked. You would be tossing that into the sauce at this point, maybe another couple of minutes, but that's pretty much the end of that. That's a little lasagna. You don't have to boil them. What you do when you start the process of making this sauce is you just take your pan and fill it with hot tap water, as hot as you can stand it, with your fingertips. Fill the pan with that, and just drop in 12 pieces of the lasagna. This box comes with about 20 pieces in it, like a typical box like that comes with 20 pieces in it. You just drop them in there and let them soak through the course of the half an hour, 45 minutes it takes you to make the sauce. And what you do then is you just take the pasta out of the pan and lay them on a paper towel and sort of drain them and then empty out the water. And then you just construct your lasagna. The two other products you need are mozzarella. I like to use slices. You can buy them big hunks and then cut them off. But you need about a pound, maybe a pound and a half. This is 8 ounces. 2 of these is a pound, and it should be enough. The other product is ricotta cheese. Now, a lot of recipes call for you to do things with the ricotta cheese. It sounds like a lot, but it turns out it's really not much. They suggest you take it out of the container, put it in a bowl, add 1 egg, add a little pepper, and then add some parsley. Now, the pepper you've got plenty of already in the sauce. You don't need that. The parsley, nobody needs anyway. And this 1 egg, I don't know what that's adding to the mix. So I just use the ricotta out of the container. And the way to make the lasagna is you start out with a layer of the sauce. And as you'll see, the sauce is on the chunky side. And so it's going to be a bumpy layer, but you're looking for about a 1/4 inch along the bottom of the pan and in each other layer. Then you add the pasta. Then you add a layer of the mozzarella cheese. And then you add a layer of the ricotta. And then repeat twice. So you've got the sauce, then the pasta, then the mozzarella, then the ricotta, 3 times over. When you get to the top, that'll leave you with a layer of a lot of white ricotta cheese. If you want to add a little color and you've got some extra sauce, I'd put that on the top. Maybe another strip of pasta to make it look good. Then you take this, put it in the 400-degree oven for about 30-35 minutes until it bubbles and until it feels hot to a fork that you stick in the middle, that sort of thing. If you have to go 40 minutes, that's fine too, but it's a 400-degree oven. So it should take only about 30 minutes. Remember, everything's cooked. This sauce that you're using is cooked. And these things just have to melt, basically. So, and the pasta, of course, is cooked. So it just has to come together. And then, importantly, after you've taken it out of the oven, you should let it sit for about 10 minutes. And at that point, it'll cut better, and it will keep from being a soupy mess, which is what they usually wind up being if you cut into them as soon as they come out of the oven. That's something you could do with this sauce. But for the moment, I think we might want to taste it. And that looks pretty good. So thinness of it, it is a sauce. Again, it's not sloppy Joe material. So you might want to make it a little bit looser. And then, of course, I'm not going to taste it since I'll be serving it to people that aren't my family. So, whereas I just gobble it down if my family were eating it. So I'm not sure how the spices go, but I know from experience that this is about right. You might want to taste it and then just add to it or subtract from it. And again, this is cooked and ready to be eaten, but you could leave it on, lower the heat, and leave it on for the rest of the afternoon and serve it at dinner time. 3 hours, 4 hours, so whatever you want. Just make sure it doesn't stick and that it is stirred as frequently as you can get around it every 5-10 minutes, just so it doesn't stick. So that's my tomato sauce bolognese. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I want to thank LexMedia for allowing us at the Avalon at Lexington Hills to present these shows. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the series. Thank you.